Hello everyone, I'm DuckFaden07 and this is another Nissa Rhinos video. Okay, so there is already one Nissa Rhinos video on my channel. If you want, you can check that out. And there is some deck tech and some card choice explanations. And I'm not going to prolong with that in this video. And I'm just going to say that we are playing Bloodbraid Elf in the main as additional Nissa target, so we can get Bloodbraid Elf with the Nissa ability. And Bloodbraid Elf is really good in this deck. It hits other Cascade spell or Nissa. Another Cascade spell, of course, hits the Crashing Footfalls. There is some Omnats and the Furies as additional Nissa targets in the main, plus Endurance and Orvar on the side. So that's it. Because we are playing Bloodbraid Elf in the main, we are playing Force of Negations in the sideboard, and that would be the main difference between this version and other Rhinos versions. I think this version is a lot more grindy and will win against mid-range decks in a format more easily than other Rhinos variants. So that is it. I'm not going to prolong with the other deck tech. If you want to see more, check my last Nissa Rhinos video. We are going to go through the gameplay from my last league I played, finished 5-0. Last league I played with this deck, I also finished 5-0, so it's basically a 10-0 score in the last 10 games with this deck, which is pretty good. And the deck feels incredible, really. So I'm really satisfied with it. And yeah, okay. So game one, match one, playing first, find Rogrin Triumph. Play the Breeding Pool with intention to play my Fire Ice in the opponent's turn, try to find the third land to cast the Shardless Agent. I did find the Zagotrium. Unfortunately, this doesn't let me cast the Shardless Agent, but I was able to cast the Scion, which my opponent was able to deal with. I decided to go for the Scion plus Leyline Binding. That's basically 8 power, same as casting the Shardless Agent, but it's more difficult for my opponent to play around than if I just cast the Shardless. So I go for the Leyline Binding at end of their turn. They decide against countering this, so I'm able to continue attacking my opponent. And I apply more pressure by casting the Shardless Agent. I'm expecting the counterspell here, but my opponent just plays the Memory Deluge. So I have 14 damage on the field at the moment. My opponent is playing Supreme Verdict in their deck, but they don't have it. They just went for the double Prismatic Ending plus Kahira to hand, which is very good news for me. So I went for another Shardless Agent plus suspend Crushing Footfalls from my hand. And I have Leyline Binding plus Fury for the next turn, which puts me in a pretty good position, and my opponent concedes the game. Okay, so let's check out the game 2 in the first match. Okay, so Rhinos, 2 bindings, Violent Outburst, that's decent hand, nothing crazy. But suspending Footfalls on turn 1 against this deck can be pretty mediocre, because they play 3 or 4 Teferis. So usually by the turn 5 they resolve it, but it's not. It doesn't mean that will happen every game. So I'm playing against control, and in these scenarios I mostly decide to go for the Violent Outburst end of their turn, make them use the counterspell, and then go for the Shardless on my turn. In a lot of cases, if you play it like this, you'll be able to resolve one of your Rhinos. If not that, you will resolve something after that. Okay, I decided to go for the Nissa here. I cracked the fetch and forced them use the Solitude to kill my Nissa. So I didn't get to cast my Shardless. But I did get additional mana to cast the Sign of Draco, which was still pretty good. My opponent went for the Archmage Arm to draw 2, and uh, I resolve my Rhinos, attack with the Scion of Draco, and put myself again in a very good position. I had a Shardless in hand, but I decided against playing it. The biggest threat from my opponent right now is playing Supreme Verdict, so I definitely didn't want to use the Shardless for nothing, because it would just die along with another set of Rhinos. So now after they use this, I play my Shardless, also have 2 mana open in case they have Spell Pierce. My opponent finds the Teferi, a pretty good timing for them, because I also have my Rhinos on suspend, so I cast my Binding, exile the Rhino opponent's Toll, and finish off the Teferi with the Shardless, but my opponent has another Teferi to bounce my Shardless agent, so I play the Leyline Binding to try to get rid of the Teferi. And try to resolve another Rhinos. So I go for the Shardless Agent, my opponent goes to destroy the Binding in response, and then I cast the Violent Outburst in response to get my set of Rhinos, and that was the last Rhinos. That was the last Rhinos, all 4 are in my graveyard, but my opponent did had a counterspell, and that was basically it. I mean, they didn't have much, but they had the Memory Deluge and the Fairy on the field, and that's more than enough. So we can check out the game 3 from this match 1. Okay, had to mulligan that first hand. I have a turn 2 Scion of Draco. If I get the land, I have a turn 3 Rhinos plus Nissa. A lot of stuff here. I need, of course, I need a Leyline Binding to get rid of the Chalice. But having Scion on turn 2 is a good start here. I will definitely need another land. I didn't get the land, but I get the force. This is okay because this allows me to continue attacking with the Scion and still hold the interaction. So I attack for here, play the Nissa. Didn't play my Cascade because they currently have a Chalice on the field. So they need to get rid of the Nissa because every fetch is pretty good for me in this situation. So they try to binding it. I cast my force, and then I get the fetch. Start using the Nissa ability. I get endurance from Nissa. I also got another Nissa from the Omnat draw. So I just cast the second Nissa in this situation. My opponent now had Chalice of the Void, plus the Fairy on the field, and they also had counterspell for my second Nissa. So it was pretty good for my opponent, and I find the Fire Ice here to try to kill the Teferi. That didn't resolve, so I just cast the Endurance. I cast the Endurance and hopefully, hoping to kill this Teferi next turn. My opponent just plays the Kahira for 6 mana. And I didn't cast the Binding. I was hoping for them to use the Teferi on my Endurance, and this meant I'm now able to cast the Leyline Binding on the Chalice and resolve the Crashing Footfalls on my turn. So this was clearly a mistake from my opponent, but I was counting on that mistake, and I was hoping for opponents to do this. So Yeah, I was hoping for them to bounce the endurance because if they go put the fairy on 4, then endurance would be able to attack the fairy next turn, and they were low on cards, so they probably wanted to use the fairy uh, to get something out of it before it dies, and I was counting on it, and it paid off, and I won the first match. Okay, so let's now see the match 2. I was playing match 2. I was playing against blue-white control, I think. Yeah, Kahira control. Nothing special here. Just the Charlotte's Agent on 3, Blood Braids on 4, which can be if they don't have the fairy, these cascaders can be pretty good against these control builds. I definitely didn't want to let them counterspell my Rhinos and then play the Teferi on their turn. So I just decided to go for the extra draw and then cast the Bloodbraid on my turn to immediately start attacking. For 3 plus Bloodbraid can bring me some additional value if I cascade into another Shardless. Or Nissa, for example, also would be nice. I didn't get the Shardless, I got the Violent Outburst, which is fine too. Opponent uses the Force of Negation plus Counterspell on Bloodbraid. I think this was a good decision. They wasted Counterspell on my Bloodbraid and then played the Narset, got the Binding, but it was good timing for me because I was able to cast the Fury now. Just kill the Narset and uh, present other very good threat here with 3 Cascade spells in my hand. This is pretty good position for me. So I went for the first Charless, resolve the Rhinos, suspend another Footfalls from my hand, attack for 6 damage here, and yeah, put myself just in a very good position if my opponent doesn't have a Supreme Verdict and they concede. Okay, so game 2 and match 2. Decent hand, no cascaders, but I have some interaction, force of negation, fire ice. I immediately use the force to get rid of the chalice. I could have used the leyline binding, but I think this is perfectly fine. Okay, so I went for the domain here on turn 2 to play the Sino Draco. I still have fire ice to kill the Teferi if they play it. So I just start attacking with my Sino Draco. And on their upkeep, I decide to use the Fire Ice to draw a card, hoping to get, of course, the Cascade spell. Didn't get the Cascade spell, but I had the Sino Draco already on the field, I had Omnat in hand, and this plan B is more than enough to beat my opponent's deck. So I did find the Shardless now, also had the Omnat, a pretty good position for me. So I got the second Triumph here, and I just attacked first. My opponent didn't have the 2 blue mana, so I decided to play my Omnat, draw the Force of Negation with Omnat, which is pretty good draw in this situation. Opponent goes for the fairy, and I definitely cast the Force of Negation I draw, but they had counterspell to resolve their Teferi, but it was okay because I had multiple removals in my hand. So I just played the Fury, killed the Teferi, attack for 4 with Dominant, and I didn't want to play Scion. I just holded the Outburst plus Binding, and that was good enough. An opponent conceded. That was the match 2. Let's check out the match 3. I had to mulligan that first one. I kept the 6 cards with the sign of Draco, Fury, Bloodbraid. This is okay. A lot of 3 drops in my deck. I definitely have high chance of drawing one to cast on turn 3. And I've started with Scion, and this was the Blue-Red Murktide. So I played the Flooded Strand. I should have maybe played Windswept Heat in this situation to make sure I get the Forest. I think Forest was more important than Plains in this situation because I had the Bloodbraid Elf. But my opponent plays the Channeler, plays the Visions. And now I got the Force. I went for the second red with that previous fetch. So I played Bloodbraid into Charles into Rhinos, which was pretty good, and I was also able to attack immediately. I put my opponent on also on 14 life. So my opponent plays the 8/8 Murktide, and I decided to attack with everything, hoping for my opponent to block the Rhino. Maybe I should have just attacked with the Rhinos. And I went for the Fury to kill the Channeler and hoping to survive on 1 life, but opponent had the Bolt to finish me, so that was game 1. I just wasn't able to deal with the early 8/8 Murktide. And let's check out the game 2. I had to mulligan that first one. This was much better. Scion on turn 2 followed with um, multiple cascade spells. That's pretty good. So I played my Wooded Foothills first, so I'm able to play the Heat on turn 3, and which allows me to find both of my basics, which can be pretty important. So I went for the Domain here, cast my Scion of course, and start pressuring my opponent. Scion can be a very good threat in this. They decide to bin the explosives, which is a very good card against Rhinos. Kind of a weird decision, but I was able to start attacking with the Scion. I decided not to cast the Shardless on my turn, but to go for the Outburst on their turn, and then Shardless on my turn. Okay, find the planes here, go for the Outburst of course, but my opponent has, I think, Pierce. It would be nice to like fire ice these 2 channelers, but yeah, it's highly unlikely if they have anything in their hand. They'll probably very easily get the Delirium with 2 of them on the field, so I just play the Omnat. And my opponent goes for the Blood Moon, but luckily I find my planes on time, and they attack for 6 damage there. I find the endurance here. That's why I was able to go for a Blood Moon. Otherwise, I would be like able to just binding the Channeler and attack with just Omnat and hold the Scion back. This way, I put my opponent very close to the lethal range, emptying their graveyard. They're not being able to cast. Unholy Heat or Murktide or whatever. So I just attack with both of these creatures. They jump with both of their channelers, putting them on 1 life, and I finish them off with the Fire Ice. I should have went for the Fire Ice on their upkeep, but yeah, it was fine because they didn't have a solution for all of this, and that was the game. Okay, so let's check out the game 3. I kept two lands here, no white mana, but it is fine. I have a blue mana to go for ice on turn 2. Then I have multiple ley lines and violent outbursts. My opponent connects with Dragavan, plays Serum Visions. I go for the Ragrin Triumph. In this situation, where I have Tomb and Pool in hand. I decide to shock here to go for the Fire Ice for fire on the Ragavan. Opponent goes into attacker's phase and I kill the Ragavan successfully with the Fire Ice. Opponent had a mediocre hand in this game 3, and I was able again to hold the outburst and then Charles on my turn. But my opponent plays the Shredder, and that's why I decided to go for the Binding plus Fire Ice, ice their land, hoping to get another fetch, which puts me in a safe position from the Blood Moon, of course. Again, I go for the same strategy, hold the outburst for their turn, and then play Charles on my turn. Opponent was a bit flooded. I had a pretty good hand, and I decide not to. Go for the Rhinos, but for the Endurance to shut off their graveyard again. And then on my turn, I'll go for the Rhinos. They had just 2 cards in hand at this moment, and I suspend the other footfalls from my hand. Uh, uh, so I go into the attack phase. They didn't have Delirium, so they target Charles Agent with the heat. I go for the footfalls, the outburst to pump my Rhinos on the field, and I connect with 10 damage, putting 4 Rhinos on the field. It's a bit risky in case they draw the explosives, but they didn't get it, and that was the game. So that was it. I also had another footfalls on suspend, which was like plus this Somnat, also good plan B. So that was the game. Okay, so that was match 3 against Rhinos. So we can now check out the match 4. Some pretty interesting games in entire league. A lot of top decks currently from the format. Like last match was Creativity. This was Scales. Previous matchup was Murktide. Then Blue-White Control, or very representative decks for the meta game. Okay, so I was playing first and went turn 2 Scion, turn 3 Rhinos. This can be pretty hard for most of decks to race with and to yeah. So I went for the fire here on Zabaz, and they put the counter on construct token. So I went for the ley line on the Springleaf Drum, making their construct smaller and getting rid of the additional mana. My opponent makes Automaton a 4/4, put some counters on Ozolith. I put them on 5 life and Scion of Draco on the field. I cast my Bloodbraid Elf into Violent Outburst, which pumps my Scion, and now I'm able to attack for 5 damage with Scion, which is enough for the lethal, so that was a pretty quick game 1. Okay, so yeah, my opponent went turn 1 Scales, turn to automaton. I could have gone, of course, for the Fury here, immediately kill the automaton, but I was hoping for them to like have a medium hand, to just play one creature or something like that. I went for the Fury here, try to kill the Ravager. They sack 2 artifacts in response. So I cast my Fire here, making them sack their Ravager, put all counters on automaton. This means if I get a green card or a Leyland Binding, I'll be able to deal with this automaton. So I had to jump here because I was on 11 life. Opponent goes for the Ballista, and I find binding on my turn. I got rid of the automaton, which was a pretty good position for me. Opponent had just 2 cards right now. A Ballista on the field, of course, but I had a Force of Figure in my hand, and they cast the Chalice. So with the Force in hand, this is actually like a pretty good position for me. But opponent had better draws at this point. So I destroyed the Vulcan Ballista and the Chalice of the Void and cast Sign of Jago plus suspend the Footfalls on their turn, but they had their own Force of Figure and another Patchwork Automaton, and I was too low on life and I needed immediate answer, didn't get it, so that was the game. Okay, so let's check out the game 3 in this match 4. Again, didn't have a white mana, but I had blue for the for the ice on turn 2, which helps me find third land. Of course, I also had a Force of Figure, which was great. So they played the Saga. I decided to immediately use it, get rid of the Saga plus Haver Might. Um, I cast my Charlotte's Agent. My opponent wasn't able to deal with the 10 power and turn 3, so they concede, and that was again a quick win in this game 3. So we can now check out the last match. Against Sanito Eater, usually playing Junt, and midrange decks. This time they're playing Creativity. Okay, so I suspend the Rhinos on 1, no interaction, just the Charlotte's Agent on 3, and followed by Nissa on 4 or whatever. So just fetch here, find my Triumph, cast the Charlotte's, of course. What's going on? I find the Zega Triumph. Yeah, sometimes this replays kind of block a bit. Okay, we are here. So I find missing red mana here to get the full domain and shock the stomping ground in, resolve the Rhinos. This was very good situation for me, but opponent had immediate Leyland Binding to get rid of one of the Rhinos, and I didn't have more Cascade spells. Having a lot of Cascade spells plus a little bit of interaction really helps in this matchup and makes it a lot easier. Opponent shocks here, plays the Fable. So pretty complicated setup here. So I was able to I had options to go for to hold a double Fire Ice or to play the Nissa. I decide to use the Nissa, and the opponent was able to resolve Teferi, and I continued attacking. I think this was a very good decision. I left Fire Ice as my interaction here, but my opponent had the 5th mana plus creativity to target both of these guys, which were both. And the second one was 2-2, so I wasn't able to kill both of them, and they resolved the Archon. I didn't have much here, and that was the game. Okay, so in the game 3, in the last match, I had, as you can see, I had multiple options here. I have had option to go for the suspend Footfall Zone 1, but suspending Footfall Zone 1 is not that great in this matchup. So I thought that playing the Ragrin Triumph on turn 1 was more important, and on turn 2 I was able to go for the suspend and the binding. I find the Shardless here, and I decided to just go for the Shardless. If they resolve the Archon, I can always just try to use a Fire Ice on it and try to get a few attacks with the Rhinos. My opponent attacks with Goblin Shaman, makes a treasure token. I block with both of my Rhinos. So now they can go for creativity, but they won't have it every time, and they didn't have it this time. So I was able to attack for the 6 damage here. I had Outburst plus a Fire Ice, and opponent makes a mistake here. So they went for the creativity, but they targeted their 2 1/1 dwarf tokens, and I'm playing Fire Ice in my deck, so that wasn't a very good decision. So if they targeted their Kiki-Jiki, they would have resolved one of their Archons. That would not necessarily be a GG, but it would be a much better position for them because I didn't draw a solution. So this meant they also decided against blocking my Charles here, which was also not very good. And yeah, so this time my opponents didn't play out maybe like the best, and they were punished for it, and I get another trophy for the Nissa Rhinos. So that was it. Okay, I really much like the deck, like um, the main board in this version, which is very grindy and can fight with can easily outgrind and out tempo the current best decks in the format, like Scam, Murktide, other Rhino decks, and I think being better against those 3 most played decks in the format, while also having all the good matchups that all the Rhino versions have, with Force and Orvar on the sideboard for creativity, plus Ashiok for Amulet Titan, I think most of, and the force of course, I think most of the matchups are very good covered here, and can really deal with anything, and I really much like this build. And that is it for today. So hope you like the build, hope you like the gameplay. If you want to help the channel, click like, click subscribe, comment in the video, and that is it for this time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.